Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're moving past the usual history lessons. We're really digging into the story of a global entertainment icon, Nintendo.
Yeah, and it's not just about the games, though. Obviously, those are huge. It's a fascinating journey, you know? You've got culture, technology, some really smart business moves, and maybe a bit of luck, too.
Exactly. We want to trace how Nintendo went from this small company in Kyoto making playing cards to the video game giant everyone knows today.
Right, focusing on those key turning points and also the kind of wider context, the historical stuff, societal changes, the economic landscape, how it all shaped them.
Okay, let's rewind way back. Kyoto, Japan. A guy named Fusajiro Yamauchi starts Nintendo. And they're making these traditional Japanese playing cards, hanafuda.
Hanafuda, yeah. These are really interesting because they're not like our standard 52 card decks. They have these beautiful designs, flowers, animals, very tied to Japanese culture and seasons.
So an early focus on artistry, maybe?
Yeah.
Even back then?
You could say that. That attention to detail, that cultural resonance, it sort of echoes later on, I think, in how they approached game design, that focus on unique visuals and, well, quality.
Okay, fast forward a bit. 1951, Fusajiro passes away, and his grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, takes over. And the company officially becomes Nintendo Playing Card Co., Ltd.
That name change is interesting, isn't it, Playing Card Co.? It kind of hints they might be thinking beyond just hanafuda, even though, video games are still decades away.
And even then, there's this spark of innovation, right? Tell us about Gunpei Yokoi.
Ah, Yokoi. Yeah, he originally joined just to, maintain the card-making machines, but he was more than a repairman. He was tinkering, inventing stuff on the side.
And that led to the Ultra Hand.
Exactly, 1970. This extendable grabbing toy was a huge hit. Sold, over 1.2 million units?
Wow, so that was really their first big step outside of cards.
Definitely. That and other little novelties he came up with, it showed Nintendo could do other kinds of entertainment, and it fostered this culture of, thinking outside the box. Super important for later.
Okay, now let's jump across the Pacific. America. We need to talk about Manoru Arakawa.
Right. Hiroshi Yamauchi's son-in-law. Came from a pretty well-off Kyoto family, textile business, I think. But he had experience in the West Canada, MIT graduate. He becomes president of Nintendo of America.
And he arrives to find a pretty tough American arcade scene.
Oh, yeah. Very tough. Back then, Japanese companies usually just licensed their games to American distributors, companies like Midway.
Midway, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, right?
Exactly those. But Yamauchi wasn't keen on that model. He'd had issues with, knockoffs and stuff in Japan, apparently connected to Yakuza elements sometimes. He wanted direct control in the U.S.
Wanted to control their own destiny, protect the brand. Seems smart in hindsight.
Very smart. Control distribution, protect your IP, ensure quality. Lessons learned back home, it gave them a foundation.
But it wasn't smooth sailing for Arakawa initially. What was that first game? Radar Scope.
First Scope, yeah. It didn't click with American players. They ended up with a warehouse full of unsold arcade cabinets. A potential disaster.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. Instead of just giving up.
Arakawa had this idea, a bit bold, really. He suggested they take those unsold Radar Scope machines and, repurpose them, put a new game in them.
And that new game needed developers.
Enter Shigeru Miyamoto.
Miyamoto, yeah. Quite a character, loved music, apparently took 5 years to finish his engineering degree. Not your typical corporate hire, maybe. But Nintendo saw something.
What was it, do you think?
I think it was that mix, the art, the music, but also the engineering background. He just had this different way of looking at things, this creative spark.
And they paired him with the experienced guy, Gunpei Yokoi.
Right. The veteran inventor, Yokoi, focused on the practical side, the tech. And Miyamoto, the young imaginative designer. It's often called a yin and yang partnership.
So they worked together, using the old Radar Scope hardware. With the help of Ikegami Tsushinki, the company that actually built Radar Scope, Yokoi provided the experienced hand, Miyamoto brought the fresh ideas.
And the result was Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong, yeah. Apparently the first idea was based on Popeye. But they couldn't get the license or something changed, so the character shifted.
But the core idea stuck. Hero, big ape bad guy, damsel in distress.
Pretty much. And the ape being like King Kong, that was a smart move. It was a cultural touchstone in both Japan and America. Everyone kind of got the reference.
And the hero, Jumpman.
Yeah.
The look was dictated by the tech limitations, right?
Totally. Very few colors available. That red overall, the blue shirt, the cap, it was all designed to be distinct and readable with just 3 colors plus the black background. Clever design.
It wasn't just the look, though. Donkey Kong had some neat gameplay things for the time. The hammer.
The hammer power-up, yeah. And those little animated cutscenes, like after you put a coin in, telling a tiny story. That was pretty new for arcades. It wasn't just about the score.
Gave you a reason to keep playing? See the next bit?
Exactly. A sense of progression.
Okay. And the name. Jumpman didn't stick. How did Mario happen?
That's a great story. Probably part legend now. But the story goes, Nintendo of America was maybe late on their rent for their warehouse or office in Seattle. And the landlord, an Italian-American guy named Mario Segal, apparently came demanding payment. Arakawa promised the money was coming. Segal gave them a break.
And someone just jokingly said, let's name Jumpman after the landlord.
Very much. And it was stuck. Mario. Sounded good, easy to say. Funny how history happens sometimes, isn't it? Almost accidental.
Incredible. And Nintendo was smart enough to trademark Donkey Kong.
Oh, yes. That trademark led to a ton of licensing deals. T-shirts, toys, cereals, you name it, generated a lot of revenue, which was crucial.
But then came a legal fight. Universal Studios.
Yeah, Universal sued, claiming Donkey Kong was infringing on their King Kong character. They sent cease and desist letters, threatened retailers.
Nintendo didn't back down.
Nope. Their lawyer, Howard Lincoln, did his homework. And they hired a sharp attorney, John Kirby. They argued King Kong was arguably in the public domain, and Universal themselves had argued that in a previous case. Plus, there were tons of unlicensed King Kong things already out there.
And Nintendo won.
They won. Big victory. It really solidified their ownership and showed they'd fight to protect their creations.
And Kirby got a pretty nice thank you gift, right?
He did. A $30,000 sailboat named Donkey Kong.
Perfect. You can't make this stuff up.
It's fantastic. And the cultural impact was growing. There was that cartoon show, Saturday Supercade.
Yeah. 1983 on CBS. Had animated versions of arcade characters. Pac-Man, Frogger, and Mario.
Voiced by Peter Cullen, no less.
Who later became Optimus Prime. Mind blown.
So video games were really starting to cross over into mainstream pop culture.
Nintendo kept building on DK. Donkey Kong 3 came out.
Which was interesting, kind of a rework of an older Nintendo shooter called Space Firebird. More of a shooter than a platformer, actually.
And then the spin-off, Mario Bros. Introducing Luigi.
Initially, he was just a palette swap of Mario, controlled the same. Later games gave him his own feel, the higher jump, slipperier movement.
And they did that little retcon thing, right? Made Mario the family name.
Yeah, so Mario's full name is officially Mario. And Luigi's is Luigi Mario. A fun bit of lore.
Okay, so arcades were booming, but then the crash happened. Early 80s.
Big time crash. The market got absolutely flooded. Too many consoles, too many games, and honestly, a lot of really bad, low-quality games, especially on the home consoles like the Atari 2600.
People just got burned out, lost confidence.
Pretty much. Too much shovelware. Atari in particular really suffered. Distributors went bankrupt. Arcades declined too because the revenue wasn't covering the cost of all those new machines. It was a huge shakeout for the whole industry.
But Nintendo saw an opportunity. Or maybe just had a different plan.
They did. Amidst all that chaos, they made a really bold strategic shift. They decided to double down on the home market, but do it right. They launched the Family Computer, or Famicom, in Japan.
Which became the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, over here.
Exactly. And it had some key design choices. Gunpei Yokoi, again, came up with that brilliant D-pad, the directional pad.
Instead of a joystick.
Yeah, joysticks on home consoles back then were often kind of flimsy, prone to breaking. The D-pad was robust, tactile, precise. It became totally iconic, still used today.
And Yamauchi was focused on price.
Right.
Making it affordable.
Absolutely crucial. He'd seen expensive computers like the Apple Lisa or the Xerox Star fail commercially. He knew the Famicom had to be accessible to families. Keep the price point down.
Smart economics. And they were already building brand awareness with Game & Watch.
Right. Those little handheld LCD games. They ported simplified single-screen versions of Donkey Kong Jr., others onto Game & Watch. Kept the characters visible, kept people playing Nintendo stuff.
And the sound of the Famicom NES. We have to talk about Koji Kondo.
Oh, Koji Kondo. A legend. He loved the music in the Donkey Kong arcade game, joined Nintendo, and just created some of the most unforgettable video game music ever.
Instantly recognizable themes.
Totally. His work was key to the whole feel of Nintendo games. He knew how to use music to create mood, excitement, make it immersive.
Which brings us to Super Mario Bros.
Yep.
The pack-in game eventually. What was the design philosophy there?
Miyamoto's guiding principle was apparently just happy, make it feel joyful, inviting. Even the enemies, the Goombas, the piranha plants, they're kind of cute in a way, right? Not genuinely menacing.
Yeah, more like obstacles in a fun playground.
Exactly. And Kondo worked magic with the Famicom sound chip. It was pretty limited tech, like 2 main channels for melody, 1 for bass, 1 for noise percussion. But he layered things, used arpeggios, created these incredibly catchy tunes and distinct sound effects.
You had to be really creative with those limitations.
Definitely spurred creativity.
Yeah.
Using the noise channel for drum sounds, things like that. Ingenious stuff.
And the game itself, Super Mario Bros., was full of secrets. The warp zones.
Yeah, built-in shortcuts, basically. It encouraged exploration, trying weird things. Plus, the sheer variety across the 8 worlds kept it fresh. Massive replayability. Huge reason for its success.
But getting the NES into American stores wasn't easy, right? Post-crash skepticism.
Very difficult. Retailers were super wary. Video games, didn't that market just die? Even bundling ROB the robot and the Zapper light gun wasn't enough initially. They saw it as a risk.
Arakawa almost pulled the plug.
Seriously considered it. But Yamauchi, back in Japan, insisted. He basically forced the issue, shipped 100,000 units to New Jersey in late '85. They decided to sell it directly in the New York City area first, bypass the hesitant national chains.
A big gamble.
Huge, but it paid off. And the real genius move was bundling Super Mario Bros. With the console later on, just like Coleco had done with Donkey Kong for their ColecoVision.
That bundle was the killer app.
Absolutely. Suddenly, everyone had to have an NES to play this amazing game everyone was talking about. Sales exploded, huge profits. It basically resurrected the home video game market in America.
Were there any weird Mario things around that time? Canceled projects?
A few oddities. There was talk of Donkey Kong's Fun with Music, like an educational game never materialized. And then you had the whole Lost Levels situation.
Ah, the real Super Mario Bros. Too.
Exactly. Miyamoto made a direct sequel in Japan, but it was brutally difficult, like punishingly hard. Nintendo of America thought it was too tough for the U.S. market.
So they didn't release it here initially?
Nope. Instead, they took a completely different Japanese Famicom game called Yun Kojo Doki Doki Panic.
Dream Factory. Heart-pounding panic. What a name.
Right. And they basically swapped out the original characters with Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Princess Peach, tweaked a few things, and released that as Super Mario Bros. 2 in the U.S.
Which is why it feels so different. Pulling vegetables out of the ground, throwing enemies.
Exactly. Different physics, different structure. But surprisingly, it was a huge success here anyway. People liked it, even though it wasn't a traditional Mario game. Shows Nintendo wasn't afraid to mix things up.
And then there was the TV show with Captain Lou Albano.
Oh, the Super Mario Bros. Super
Yeah.
Show, yeah. Live-action segments with wrestler Lou Albano as Mario, Danny Wells as Luigi, bookending cartoons. Plus, Albano telling kids to do the Mario.
A very unique cultural moment.
Definitely cemented Mario further into pop culture, especially for kids at the time, even if it was, well, a bit cheesy.
Okay, moving on. The next big Mario game, Super Mario Bros. 3. This felt like a true evolution.
It really did. Miyamoto's philosophy for SMB3 wasn't just about making it harder like Lost Levels. It was about innovation. New ideas, new power-ups, the Tanuki suit, the frog suit, Kuribo's shoe, new enemies, whole new gameplay mechanics.
And the world map. That was a big change.
Huge. Gave it a sense of adventure, progression. You could choose paths sometimes. And each world had a distinct theme. Grassland, desert land, waterland, giant land. It felt massive. Some people even say the map kind of looks like Japan, with Bowser's castle near where Kyoto is.
Interesting. It also introduced that feeling of flow, didn't it? That perfect balance of challenge and skill.
Yeah, that concept from psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Nintendo got really good at hitting that sweet spot where the game is challenging enough to be engaging, but not so hard it's frustrating. Keeps you in the zone. SMB3 nailed that.
Nintendo was also getting smart about building a community, right? The hotline, the magazine.
Definitely. They had a toll-free hotline for game tips, the game counselors, and the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter, which quickly evolved into the massive Nintendo Power magazine, created this whole ecosystem around the games.
And the marketing for SMB3 was huge. McDonald's Happy Meals.
Yep. Mario 3 toys and Happy Meals. And then there was the movie, The Wizard.
Oh man, The Wizard. Basically a giant commercial for Nintendo culminating in the reveal of Super Mario Bros.
Pretty much. Built incredible hype for the game before it even launched. Very clever, if unsubtle, marketing.
Was there ever a PC version of Mario 3? I heard a rumor.
Ah, yes. The story goes that id Software, the guys who later made Doom, actually created a working PC demo of Super Mario Bros. 3 back in the day. They pitched it to Nintendo.
And Nintendo said no.
Said no. They wanted Mario exclusively on their hardware. Total control. So the Baiade took their smooth scrolling engine and made Commander Keen instead. Another what-if moment in gaming history.
Nintendo was expanding globally too, even into the Soviet Union. With Tetris.
Yeah, that whole Tetris saga is complex, but Nintendo, specifically through Hank Rogers working with them, managed to secure the handheld and console rights for Tetris, famously beating Atari.
And Tetris on the Game Boy.
Yeah.
What a killer app that was.
Absolutely perfect match. Made the Game Boy essential, and it basically established puzzle games as a massive genre for handhelds.
The Game Boy dominated, didn't it? Even against technically superior handhelds.
Yeah, you had the Sega Game Gear, the Atari Lynx, both had color screens, better graphics, but they chewed through batteries like crazy.
And the Game Boy just kept going.
Exactly, that longer battery life, plus Tetris and later Pokemon, that was the winning combination. Practicality and killer software trumped raw specs.
Fans were getting really passionate by this point. Online guides started appearing.
Oh yeah, early internet, bulletin board systems. People were sharing tips, walkthroughs, finding all the secrets in Mario 3. The fan community was really taking shape.
Nintendo seemed to have really loyal employees too. People stayed a long time. Howard Phillips leaving was unusual.
Howard Game Master Phillips, yeah. He was a big face for Nintendo of America in the Nintendo Power days. His departure to LucasArts was notable because, yeah, Nintendo often felt like a place people stayed at for their whole careers.
They also kept tight control over third-party developers, didn't they?
Very tight. Strict licensing terms, exclusivity clauses. They even controlled the manufacturing of the cartridges. That sometimes led to issues like chip shortages in Japan because demand was so high for games like Dragon Quest on the Famicom.
Okay, on to the 16-bit wars. Sega Genesis arrives. TurboGrafx 16.
Yeah, the competition heats up. Sega, especially, came out swinging with the Genesis, or Mega Drive elsewhere, and really pushed the whole Genesis does what Nintendo angle. Better graphics, faster processor, more attitude.
And Nintendo's response was the Super NES, or SNES, with Masayuki Umura leading the hardware design again, the guy behind the NES Famicom.
Right, and again, Miyamoto's philosophy held sway. Don't rush the flagship Mario game, polish it, make it perfect.
Which led to Super Mario World.
Super Mario World! Pack in-game for the SNES. Just a masterpiece. Introduced Yoshi, had amazing level design, secret exits everywhere. Really showed off what the SNES could do.
Was that when the Mario movie talk heated up? With Dustin Hoffman interested?
Yeah, there were reports of Hoffman was keen. But Nintendo apparently favored Danny DeVito for Mario. Didn't happen, though. Ultimately, Bob Hoskins played Mario and John Leguizamo played Luigi in that infamous 1993 movie.
Let's maybe not dwell on the movie.
Probably for the best. Box office bomb, critical disaster.
But the SNES had cool tech, like Mode 7.
Mode 7 graphics. Yeah, that allowed for scaling and rotating background layers, creating these cool pseudo 3D effects. You saw it prominently in F-Zero, and crucially, Super Mario Kart.
Mario Kart. And Dr. Mario earlier. Mario wasn't just a platformer hero anymore.
Exactly. Nintendo brilliantly expanded the brand. Mario Kart basically created the kart racing genre. Dr. Mario was a hit puzzle game, showed the characters had appeal way beyond running and jumping.
Nintendo's marketing was still very kid-focused.
Largely, yes. They owned the kids' market in the early 90s. Immense market share. They could release Mario Paint, an art tool, or Yoshi's Cookie, another puzzle game, and they'd sell.
But Sega was making inroads with Sonic, that cool, edgy alternative.
Definitely. Sonic the Hedgehog was a direct challenge. Faster gameplay, more tood. It created that fierce console war rivalry. Mario was polite, friendly. Sonic was cool, kind of rebellious Gen X vibe.
We also got Wario around this time, the anti-Mario.
Wario, yeah. First appeared as the villain in Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy. Greedy, mischievous, led to his own games like Wario Land and the puzzle game Wario's Woods, explored things of like personal gain versus Mario's pure playfulness.
Miyamoto talked about that distinction, right? Mario versus Link from Zelda?
Yeah, he saw Mario as representing pure, joyful play, whereas Link was more about the player's ego, the adventure, overcoming challenges, different emotional experiences.
Technology was moving fast then. Hardware felt outdated quickly.
Super fast. And this led to that huge turning point. The Nintendo-Sony partnership for a CD add-on for the SNES, the PlayStation.
Which famously fell apart acrimoniously.
Very much so. Disagreements over licensing, control. Nintendo publicly snubbed Sony at a trade show, announcing a new partnership with Philips instead. Sony was furious.
And Sony decided, fine, we'll make our own console.
Exactly. They took their work, refined it, and launched the Sony PlayStation, using CDs, which turned out to be a massive advantage. Cheaper to make games, huge storage capacity. It fundamentally changed the industry and ended Nintendo's dominance.
Yeah, that Philips partnership didn't go well either. The CDI.
Oh, the Philips CD. Yeah, that resulted in those truly awful licensed Nintendo games, including Hotel Mario. Best forgotten, really.
Nintendo was still huge on merchandising Mario, though.
Massive. Mario was everywhere. Lunchboxes, bed sheets, pasta shapes. But interestingly, they kept a tighter leash on merchandising other characters, like Link. Mario was the main cash cow for that stuff.
This era also saw the rise of game ratings, right? The ESRB, because of games like Mortal Kombat.
Yes, concerns about violence led to U.S. Senate hearings, and the industry formed the Entertainment Software Ratings Board to self-regulate. Sega initially tried to position itself as maybe more responsible, ironically, given Mortal Kombat was big on Genesis. Nintendo, with its family focus, mostly stayed above the fray.
Nintendo kept pushing the SNES graphics, though. Star Fox, Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, Star Fox used the Super FX chip for actual 3D polygons, very cutting edge for a console then. And Donkey Kong Country, developed by Rare in the UK, used pre-rendered 3D graphics turned into sprites. Looked absolutely stunning for the time.
But Miyamoto canned a 3D Mario project, Mario FX.
He did. Perfectionism. He wasn't satisfied with how it was shaping up on the SNES hardware. Didn't feel right.
So instead, we got Yoshi's Island.
Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, which looked completely different. This beautiful hand-drawn crayon aesthetic, a real artistic statement, moving away from the pre-rendered or polygon race for a bit, showed they'd prioritize unique art style.
So heading towards the next generation, Nintendo's strategy was talk up the 64-bit machine.
Pretty much. Keep promoting SNES enhancements like the Super FX chip and DKC, while building hype for the Ultra 64, their next big thing, to counter the emerging 32-bit consoles like PlayStation and Sega Saturn.
But first, there was the Virtual Boy detour.
The Virtual Boy, Gunpei Yokoi's project, a 3D handheld, sort of, tabletop really, red and black, stereoscopic graphics, gave people headaches, a commercial flop.
And sadly, that led to Yokoi leaving Nintendo.
Yeah, the failure of the Virtual Boy reportedly contributed to his departure. A real shame given his immense contributions over the years.
Meanwhile, the PlayStation was rocketing. Final Fantasy VII was huge.
Massive. FFVI jumping from Nintendo to PlayStation really signaled a shift. Developers were embracing the storage capacity and lower cost of CDs. Nintendo sticking with cartridges for the upcoming Nintendo 64 started to look like a potential liability.
Sega was having its own problems too. Saturn wasn't doing great. The failed Bandai merger.
Yeah, Sega Saturn struggled against the PlayStation, especially in the US. Then there was a failed merger with toy giant Bandai. Key executives resigned. They launched the Dreamcast later, which was innovative, but ultimately couldn't turn things around.
Didn't Sega's chairman basically kill the Dreamcast early?
Aizawa Okawa. Yeah. He publicly stated it would be Sega's last console, trying to reassure investors maybe, but it killed consumer confidence. Plus, Microsoft was entering the ring with the Xbox, having learned a lot from Sega's hardware efforts and mistakes.
And there were internal issues at Sega, US versus Japan divisions.
Definitely reports of cultural clashes and friction between Sega of Japan and Sega of America. Nintendo of America seemed to have a bit more autonomy under Arakawa.
Then finally, the Nintendo 64 launches. And with it, Super Mario 64.
Game changer. Utterly revolutionary. Mario's leap into 3D wasn't just competent, it defined how 3D platforming worked. The analog stick control, the camera system, even if sometimes fiddly, the open-ended exploration-focused levels, it set the template.
Miyamoto wanted even more levels initially.
Yeah, the ambition was huge, maybe 40 levels, but they needed to launch the console, so they focused on perfecting the core experience with the levels they had. Still felt massive and groundbreaking.
Did the N64 try online stuff?
It did, but with limited success. There was a modem planned, the RANnet service in Japan with the 64DD disk drive add-on, but it never took off globally. Cartridges made online difficult, too.
Nintendo stuck to its family-friendly guns with N64 mostly. Mario Party.
Yeah, Mario Party was a huge multiplayer hit. They knew their strength was accessible, fun, family entertainment, less about being a broad communications company like Sony was becoming with PlayStation.
And then came another phenomenon, Pokémon.
Pokémon exploded. Started on the Game Boy, but its success was astronomical. Trading, collecting, the cartoon, movies. It became a global cultural force, bringing huge profits and a new generation of fans to Nintendo handhelds. Even had a Mario cameo in Pokémon Stadium, I think.
Nintendo did branch out a bit, though, working with Square on Mario RPG for SNES.
Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. Yeah, that showed some flexibility, collaborating with a traditional RPG powerhouse. Great game.
But online remained elusive for Nintendo, despite Yamauchi's belief in it.
Yeah, Satellaview in Japan for SNES, the NES modem attempts. They kept trying, but the tech or market wasn't quite ready or their approach wasn't right. But Yamauchi kept pushing the idea internally.
Until the GameCube. Did they finally ditch cartridges?
They did. The GameCube used mini optical discs, learning from the N64's limitations and the success of PlayStation, finally embraced optical media.
How did the GameCube stack up against PS2, Dreamcast, now Xbox?
It was technically behind the PS2 and Xbox in raw power. Dreamcast was already fading by then. GameCube had that quirky purple lunchbox design, the handle. Nintendo marketed its unique games and experiences over specs.
And the timing wasn't great. .com bust, 9/11.
Yeah, the economic climate definitely wasn't ideal for launching a new console. Consumer spending was tight.
Did the GameCube have any gimmicks? Connectivity.
It did connect with the Game Boy Advance, which was pretty cool. You could use the GBA as a controller or a second screen in some games. Nintendo also put out collections of classic NES games on GameCube discs, playing the nostalgia card.
Handhelds were still going strong.
Yeah.
GBA SP, Game Boy Micro.
The GBA SP with its clamshell design and backlight was hugely popular. The Micro was this tiny, stylish thing, almost like a fashion accessory, paying homage to Game & Watch. They kept iterating.
And releasing old NES games on GBA.
Yeah, the classic NES series put those iconic games in people's pockets again. And games like Mario vs. Donkey Kong on GBA were direct throwbacks to the arcade original, celebrating that history.
Mario's cultural impact just kept growing. Bands named after Mario stuff.
Seriously, shows how deep it penetrated. Miyamoto was still very hands-on promoting GameCube, too.
Did Nintendo ever publish anything edgier on GameCube? I remember Conker on N64.
Conker's Bad Fur Day was N64, a very surprising, mature game from Rare, published by Nintendo late in the N64's life. On GameCube, they published things like Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, a pretty unique psychological horror game, and collaborated with Sega for the intense F-Zero GX. So not just kiddie stuff, but the core remained family-friendly.
Metroid Prime, Wind Waker.
Yeah.
Some real classics on GameCube.
Absolutely. Metroid Prime was a stunning first-person reimagining. Wind Waker's cel-shaded art style was controversial at first, but now beloved. Lots of great Mario spin-offs, too. Sunshine, Double Dash, golf, tennis, baseball.
And then came the DS dual screens, touchscreen.
The Nintendo DS, another game-changer for handhelds. Opened up totally new gameplay possibilities. Backward compatible with GBA, too, which was smart.
But not original Game Boy.
No, just GBA. But crucially, the DS later got Wi-Fi capabilities. Nintendo finally cracked networked handheld gaming, fulfilling Yamauchi's vision.
And the game library was huge, right? Broad appeal.
Incredibly diverse. Brain Age, Nintendogs, Animal Crossing, puzzle games, RPGs, alongside the traditional Nintendo franchises. It brought in tons of new players, people who didn't consider themselves gamers.
Was Miyamoto still heavily involved? I heard something about his dog.
Yeah, the inspiration for Nintendogs apparently came from his own experiences raising a puppy. His direct involvement maybe shifted a bit as the company grew and his interests broadened, but his influence was still huge.
And we got new Super Mario Bros. On DS. Back to basics.
Yeah, a brilliant move. Classic 2D Mario gameplay, but with updated visuals, some new power-ups like the Mega Mushroom, multiplayer, hugely successful. Proved 2D Mario still had massive appeal.
Competition was heating up again, though. PSP iPhone.
Sony's PSP was a powerful multimedia handheld, and the iPhone was starting to emerge as a serious casual gaming platform. The market was getting crowded.
And Nintendo's answer for the home console market was the Wii.
The Wii. Wow, nobody saw that coming, quite like it did. Motion controls. The Wii Remote. It wasn't about graphics power. It was about intuitive, accessible fun.
It brought in everyone. Grandparents playing Wii Sports bowling.
Exactly. Wii Sports, bundled in most places, was genius. So easy to pick up and play. The Wii expanded the market like nothing before it. It had online features too, the Mi channel for avatars. Miyamoto even got an award from The Economist for the Wii's innovation.
Mario's everywhere now. Cakes, fan art. E3 is still Nintendo's big showcase.
Yeah, E3 remains a key platform for them to generate excitement, and Mario is just ingrained in culture.
Did competitors try to copy the Wii's motion controls?
Oh, yeah. Microsoft came out with Kinect, Sony with PlayStation Move, both seen as direct responses to the Wii's success. Nintendo had shifted the focus from just hardware software to amusement. making gaming feel more like real activities.
We're connect and move based on Nintendo research. Any truth to that?
Rumors circulated, yeah, that Nintendo had experimented with similar camera or motion tech earlier, but hadn't found the right way to implement it until a Wii Remote's simpler approach. Hard to say for sure.
Portable gaming continued to evolve. DS versus PSP versus iPhone.
A constant battleground. Different strengths, different audiences, but all vying for people's time and money.
And through it all, Mario's role. Usually rescuing the princess.
Mostly, yeah. That's the classic setup. Miyamoto seems to like keeping Mario as this pure avatar for play, resisting really deep storylines or complex character arcs for the main platformers.
But sometimes you get glimpses of good storytelling. Paper Mario.
Oh, definitely. The Paper Mario series, Mario and Luigi RPGs, they often have witty writing, memorable characters, surprisingly clever plots. Thousand Year Door is a fan favorite for its story.
Mario's kind of an everyman, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Master Chief or Lara Croft, lets you project onto him.
That's a good way to put it. He's often mute, very relatable in his basic design. You are Mario when you play.
Nintendo's also talked more about environmental stuff, manufacturing.
Yeah, like most large electronics companies, they face scrutiny over supply chains, manufacturing ethics. Places like Foxconn, they have made efforts towards more sustainable practices, packaging, etc. An ongoing challenge for the industry.
It's interesting comparing Nintendo and Apple sometimes. Closed systems, loyal fans.
There are parallels. That focus on controlling the hardware and software ecosystem, creating a seamless user experience, cultivating that intense brand loyalty, both have been very successful with that model.
So, looking ahead, what's next for Nintendo? For Mario, we've seen joystick eras, analog, now motion and touch.
It's always hard to predict Nintendo. They zig when others zag. They prioritize fun and unique experiences over raw power. Whatever comes next, you can bet Mario will adapt, just as he always has. The impact of games, and Mario specifically, on culture is just undeniable now.
So wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's clear Nintendo's story is more than just business success. It's innovation, adaptation, sometimes sheer luck, all reflecting these bigger shifts in tech and society.
Absolutely. From hanafuda cards to the Wii and beyond, it's a remarkable journey. Which leaves us with a final thought for you listening. Nintendo's always been a disruptor, right? What do you think their next unexpected move might be in this constantly changing entertainment world? And what lessons can other fields learn from how they've navigated it all?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the incredible history of Nintendo.